Now, for more on Germany's elections and the country's economy, I'm joined by Aurel Braun, live from Toronto. He's a professor of international relations and political science at the University of Toronto. He's also an associate at Harvard University's Davis Center. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So for people who are still getting familiar, what are the key economic issues at play with this election in Germany?
Germany seems to be an island of stability. Its economy is continuing to grow, unemployment rates are very low, and Angela Merkel is viewed as someone very competent, highly dependable. She has had 3 terms, and so she's moving towards her 4th term. So the aura of competence, of reassurance, is a very important one, especially given that there's Brexit, given that there's so much international tension. The problem is that beneath the surface, there are certain issues. There are problems regarding immigration. There are problems in long-term relations with the United States, with Russia. And this is why we see that at the same time that we look at all this kind of reassurance, there has been a rise of extremist movements, particularly the Alternative for Germany, which now might conceivably come in as the 3rd largest party.
And as you mentioned there, even though Chancellor Merkel is expected to win her 4th term very handily, it is going to be one of the most fractured parliaments, with about perhaps 6 parties expected to win some seats, including the far-right party. What should we read into that?
Well, what it tells us is that Angela Merkel represents stability, she represents predictability, but the world is volatile. And even the domestic politics are volatile. So Germany took a very generous, a very important step in bringing in something like 1 million refugees, but they have to be integrated. And they have not been integrated that successfully in the past. You look at something like 3 million Turks who came many, many years ago as Gastarbeiter, and they are not viewed as German by many of the native population. And so that creates tensions. There are issues regarding the EU with Brexit. The British are dissatisfied. There's a new leader in France, Emmanuel Macron, who's very ambitious, who wants to co-lead together with Angela Merkel, but lacks that experience. There's the problem with Russia, that Russia continues to threaten members of Eastern Europe, and NATO has to respond to that. Angela Merkel has been very solid when it came to sanctions against Russia, but she seems to have an aversion to any kind of military steps, even giving defensive armaments to Ukraine. So these are issues that keep percolating underneath the surface.
So then how importantly economically are these issues, especially beyond Germany's borders, when you look at to broader Europe and some of its trade partners? How are they viewing this?
It's an important question because Germany is profoundly important because of its weight. It is the largest economy. It is the most stable economy. It is a kind of exemplary economy, a model for the others, but not everyone wants or is able to emulate that economy. So whatever happens in Germany reverberates around the EU. So if there's turmoil in Germany, if there's political instability in Germany, if the German economy begins to falter, that would have a profound impact on all of the smaller economies. And this is why, at one level, the rest of Europeans want the Germans to succeed. At another level, they are also weary of being dominated by Germany.
Now, Germany's strong economy is cited as one of the reasons the auto industry scandal and also the influx of refugees didn't ruin Merkel's election hopes. So what is driving the country's growth?
Well, in the 1990s, Germany took some very important steps that the other continental European countries, like France, like Italy, did not take. And that is that they brought about labor reform. They brought about labor flexibility. This allowed for more investments to come in. It reassured the business community. It created a cooperative kind of atmosphere. The Germans have been also very creative at moving into the high-end products. The reputation of German industry is excellent, the dependability in delivering things. So if you look at the car industry, for example, in many parts of Europe, the car industry is in great difficulties, whether it is France or Italy. Look at Fiat.
Right.
The German car makers are thriving.
Now, as we look at some of the challenges that could perhaps make Germany's economy more vulnerable, if not really tackled, what would you say the standouts are?
Well, it is not a case that we can look simply at economics. It is kind of intertwining of political issues and economic issues, of domestic concerns and international concerns. Germany is an importer of energy. A great deal of that energy comes from Russia. Relations with Russia are not particularly good. If Russia acts, let's say, assertively or aggressively in the Baltic states, that will create an enormous energy disruption. So that can have a kind of impact. We don't know what the ultimate impact of Brexit is going to be. So there are so many of these variables that at the moment seem to be stable or at least quiescent, but there can be this kind of mixture and reverberation that creates instability. And I think this is one of the reasons why the Germans want Angela Merkel back. A few months ago, it appeared that the opposition party led by Martin Schulz had a good chance of winning.
Right.
Not so. They're way behind now because she represents that reassurance. And all I'm suggesting is that that reassurance is important, but we should at the same time be somewhat cautious.
Indeed. Thank you so much. Aurel Braun, Professor of International Relations and Political Science at the University of Toronto and Associate at the Davis Center at Harvard University.